Hey everyone, shout out to all the members, supporters, and candidates out there who are running for the PBC. I wish each and every one of you a happy candidate, and hopefully this country will be on a much better path after October of this year. Hashtag PBC 2019. And yeah, you better believe I'm really happy about how things have been unfolding since my video that I put out there just a few months ago in regards to my support for the PBC. I made it a point to stress how important freedom of speech was in terms of my support for the People's Party of Canada. And I'm very pleased to see that Maxime has made that a central focal point of his platform and the policy position that the PPC has taken. Kudos to you for doing so, sir, and much appreciation to all those who are standing in support and solidarity with the promotion of freedom of speech in this country. Because we got to keep in mind, folks, without freedom of speech, all your other freedoms tend to fall by the wayside. Headline out of the Post Millennial: the PPC's strength is their dedication to free speech. This being reported by Barbara Kay. And I'll mention, actually, in addition to my appreciation to not just the members and supporters and the candidates in the PPC, but those who actually used to be representatives or maybe still are in some degree or in some regard, but now are turning towards alternative media sources such as Barbara Kay to help spread some information that push back against the status quo and giving Canadians an alternative voice and perspective. Thank you once again, Barbara, and anyone else out there that's doing that. I got a lot of respect for all of you, even those of you I don't necessarily agree with. But at the very least, I'm appreciative of the fact that you're offering information to entice the typical Canadian to think more critically about these social, economic, and political issues that affect us all. Now, before I actually get into this article, I just want to cover the fact that, yeah, the PPC, if you go to their People's Party of Canada website, and I'll post a link to it in the description of this video below, but yeah, they now have, as part of the policy and the platform of the party, a whole new section entitled Freedom of Expression, Protecting Canadians from Censorship and Dissemination. So once again, kudos and mad respect for making freedom of speech part of the policy and the platform of the PPC. So back to this post-millennial article. The Nationalist Brexit Party, led by outspoken Eurosceptic Nigel Farage, came into existence last January. 4 months later, it boasts 29 MEPs, members of the European Parliament. By contrast, this past May, Canada's Green Party elected its second member of Parliament after 36 years of existence. There's a message here. The Green Party is not a disruptor of the status quo, and it doesn't represent groundswell of voices who feel left out of the conversation. It's just a more fibrously left-wing form of the same political granola served up by the NDP and the Liberal Party. It's not really needed, but the Brexit Party's success is a genuinely organic statement of anger directed at traditional parties by great swaths of citizens who not only feel disrespected and ignored, they actually were, by any objective standard, disrespected and ignored. It was needed. 40% of Canadians routinely choose not to vote. A certain number are politically indifferent, but another number don't vote because they don't feel any of the parties represent their views. Normally, they don't feel worried enough to bestir themselves. Will this pattern hold in October? Or is this Maxime Bernier's disruptor moment? His People's Party of Canada was officially launched in January, and it presently has more members than the Green Party. The PPC is fielding candidates in all 338 ridings, an impressive accomplishment given the time constraints. Their basic platform, which includes tax simplification, the abolition of supply management, as well as long overdue abolition of interprovincial tariffs, indicates commitment to fundamental conservative principles. Well, I would just stress out that could also be conducive with the promotion of genuine liberty-oriented initiatives, aka libertarian values and principles. That's the thing. On the economic side of things, libertarians are even more conservative than an actual conservative as far as fiscal prudence and personal responsibility. But the same holds true on the left side and the liberal side of that equation. Libertarians are even more socially liberal than those on that left side of the spectrum. Libertarians are all about maximizing your social and economic freedoms, which is why they can't be painted into a political box or placed on either side of the political spectrum. But those issues speak to the mind, not the heart, and a slew of anxious Canadian hearts are what is presently up for grabs. One of Bernier's great strengths is that in spite of years of political experience, he has not become jaded or cynical. He wears his own heart on his sleeve. Not a thespian, mantra-driven, latch-your-mouse, pre-programmed heart of the kind Trudeau is so famous for, but an unsentimental heart full of deeply considered convictions that beat like ruggedly manned boats against the progressive current upon which Justin Trudeau is a dreamily bobbing twiglet. One of those convictions is that chronic breastbeating about the sins of the past and suppression of pride in Canadians' national identity is creating an unhealthy social and cultural environment dominated by grievance-mongering special interest activism that corrodes national confidence and unity of purpose. Another related, perhaps pivotal strength is Bernier's passion for freedom of speech. Speaking of which, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below and move on over to that policy platform of the PPC, brought to you by Maxime Bernier. Issue: the rights of Canadians to freely hold and express beliefs are being eroded at an alarming speed under the Trudeau government. Some of its recent decisions even require that Canadians renounce their most deeply held moral convictions and express opinions they disagree with. In 2018, the Liberal government denied summer job funding to organizations, including charities, that would not sign an attestation supporting abortion. It also passed Bill C-16 as part of a trend to force Canadians to express support for the existence of various gender identities beyond the biological categories of male and female, and to use pronouns demanded by those who identify with these other genders. In addition to these assaults on conscience, the government launched a series of regulatory attacks on free speech on the internet and is pressuring social media companies, which are already censoring speech that isn't politically correct, to crack down even more. It is also considering bringing back Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. The hate speech provision was repealed by the Conservative government in 2013 because it was being used arbitrarily to censor statements that offended some people on the internet. In what appears to be the first step towards restricting our rights to criticize some religions, it adopted M103, a motion that condemns religious discrimination but only specifically mentions one religion, Islam, and without defining the term Islamophobia. Finally, on university campuses, a growing number of faculty and administrators, those who should be fighting for open debate of controversial ideas, have become aggressive advocates for censorship. Facts. History and social scientific research show that freedom of conscience and freedom of expression, when maximally protected, advance the intellectual life of a nation, foster greater ideological diversity and societal understanding, and nurture other freedoms necessary for successful democracy. This is why Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees citizens freedom of conscience and religion, as well as freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. I'll just point out right now is actually something that should be contained within here is the complete repeal of anything remotely resembling hate speech laws. The U.S. Constitution, upheld multiple times by the Supreme Court of the United States, have repeated multiple times that there is no such thing as a hate speech provision as a means to suppress or deny people their voice. And I believe that should happen in Canada as well. Hate speech is subjective and used as a tool to silence and suppress people who are ideological opponents to the establishment or the ruling class. So hate speech laws in Canada should be stricken from the books and no longer accepted. Our plan. What some people find politically incorrect, offensive, or even hateful cannot serve as the legal basis for discrimination and censorship. Canadians should be able to enjoy maximum freedom of conscience and expression as guaranteed in Section 2 of the Charter. A People's Party government will restrict the definition of hate speech in the criminal code to expression which explicitly advocates the use of force against identifiable groups or persons based on protected criteria such as religion, race, ethnicity, sex, or sexual orientation. And there it is. So just as I was saying that yes, hate speech provision should be stricken from the law in Canada, it turns out that that's going to be part and parcel of the policy of the People's Party of Canada, and obviously something I definitely agree with and support. Repeal any existing legislation on regulation curtailing free speech on the internet and prevent the reinstatement of Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act. Definitely support that. Repeal C-16 and M103. Big time in support of those initiatives. Ensure that Canadians can exercise their freedom of conscience to its fullest extent as it is intended under the Charter and are not discriminated against because of their moral convictions. Right on. Withhold federal funding from any post-secondary institution shown to be violating the freedom of expression of its students or faculty. That's another good one. Beautiful. And I'm sure Jordan Peterson will appreciate that as well. Well, not just for Jordan Peterson, David Haskell, another university professor who's a staunch advocate of freedom of speech. Anyways, folks, I'll place a link to this policy as well as the original article brought to you by the Post Millennial in the description of this video below. But once again, I'm really happy to see that we have, an upcoming party, a new initiative that we can all get behind, those of us who stand for individual rights, freedom, and liberty, such as the PPC, under the leadership of Maxime Bernier. But we also have alternative news sources, such as the Post Millennial, who is helping to push back against the status quo or the dominant narrative espoused by those who are your current thought leaders or opinion makers. Times they are a-changing, and liberty is definitely on the rise in Canada. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.